Hello, welcome to a new series. I am starting a series where I will focus on individual year, and we are talking about 1968, a big year in my opinion. Um, One of the things that I'd love to do is read up on the history of comic books, and I brought out this book a few times before, and I have read quite a few blogs and articles from many other comic fans that for a lot of people 1968 was not a good year because it started the trend of Marvel selling out to corporates, get into toy lines and other products, um, as well as starting to raise prices and um, also stop being the house of ideas. A lot of people pinpoint to 1968 as the beginning of the end as far as Jack Kirby stopped coming up with new ideas for Marvel because of the issues he had with Marvel underappreciate him. Um, so this video will provide my opinions and my view where not that I disagree or trying to discredit other people that express those views. I'm just gonna give you a different take on why I think 1968 is a great year and not a not so great year or not the beginning of the end kind of year. But before I go on, I do want to answer one of the questions that left over from the contest. Schmo Daddy asked me what's my opinion on overvalued, overpriced books of the Silver Age as well as bronze and coppers. And I can answer part of the question right here, right now, and that had a lot to do with 1968. But first and foremost, just because I think these books are overpriced and overvalued does not mean I think they will go down, because um, there are just a lot of demands for them and a lot of fans love them. So they've been overpriced and overvalued for a long time, and they might even go much higher for years to come. Uh, what I'm talking about all of the launching of number one and spin-off of many of the titles, like Hulk 102, Captain America 100, Iron Man number 1, Doctor Strange 169, and so forth. Those books, in my opinion, are the overpriced book of the Silver Age. They stood out in my mind because the only thing really special about them is being number one or the character having their own title. Other than that, for the majority of the books, nothing new was introduced in them. They were retold of origins. Uh, you know, Unlike say Detective 27 in the Golden Age, you have Detective 27, and when they launched Batman number 1, Batman number 1 was significant because it introduced the Joker and a new storyline with Robin and all that. So when you're looking at how Marvel launched Iron Man 1, Hulk 102, Doctor Strange 169, those books to me, although they are great launch, they are not significant enough to warrant the value that most are willing to pay. But that's just my 2 cents on what I think is overvalued in the Silver Age. Okay, back to 1968. As I mentioned earlier in my video, I want to provide a different take on why I think 1968 is great, a fantastic year, instead of it not being so great. But in order to talk about that, I think I want to discuss a little bit about what made Marvel great up until 1968. I had had this discussion with many fans and collectors over the years that what was done, what was created in 1961 through 65 were an amazing time for Marvel, for Jack, Stan, Ditko, as well as the team that was brought in to help out, from Gene Colan to Buscema and then Romita. But what made that time great, and all those characters that was created back in those 4 or 5 years, fantastic and wonderful and unforgettable for the most part, were we are dealing with a blank canvas. When you have a blank canvas, it's much easier to create things, to put things on a blank canvas and make it unique and special and wonderful. Even when many of those things are not original ideas, I think it is fairly well known that the Fantastic Four were basically the monsters that Stan and Jack wrote and drew many years before in their monster title. It just happened that for that magical time in 61 and 62 that they were able to capture something, a different audience that took in what they created along with the personalities that they put into those characters and make it something wonderful. So I'm not discounting that what Jack and Stan did was wonderful, but it is a special time where it's like lightning in a bottle. It's tough to recapture that ever again. But over the years from 61 to 65, the canvas was blank and it was populated with so many wonderful characters. And I think in 1968 onward, sure, there was a beginning of, the period where Jack no longer provide ideas to Marvel, new ideas, because of the issues he had with management. But if we look at what Jack done after he left Marvel, the Fourth World was not well received. It has some high point, it has some midpoint, and a lot of low point also. The reason why those titles were canceled was, of the time. Jack was great, but by the early 70s, the different generation of fan look at things very differently, and I think that's that's where I differ from many of the people, writers and fans and collectors that think 1968 is the beginning of the end. To me, part of what happened in 1968 onward is a big change in social culture. You're talking about the Vietnam War, full bloom. You're talking about the age of the disco. You're talking about, Woodstock generation. There are just so many other factors that play into the daily lives that everyone, the teenagers through the college kids, that comic book is just not the same. One of the problems with comic books, and because they are so addictive, is that people latch on to what they love, latch on to the same notion that nothing can change. Everything, if I love this stuff when I'm 10 years old, I expect anyone to love it when they're 10 years old, even 20 years later. It's just not the same. Time change, people change, culture change, society change, and I think, what happened from 1968 as far as, comic is concerned, one of the complaint was, it's the beginning of the raising prices. Well, do they have a choice? Price cannot stay the same. With escalating inflation in the early 70s through the mid 70s, on top of all the issues that I brought forth as far as distribution issues, it's as if Marvel and DC can sit there and keep printing books for 12 cents. So the raise in price has many other components on why it has to be done, instead of Marvel selling out and being greedy. And it's a circular argument that, because Marvel raised prices, it lose readership. It lost readership to many other things like the TV. Often when I read the complaint about 1968 and the negativities with the 1968, often many of the current world situation was never taken into account. But back to creativity, when you have a blank canvas like what Jack and Stan and Ditko had in the early 60s, I think it's much easier to throw ideas out there and it sticks and become popular with the fan. But by 1968, as that canvas is full, it's much tougher to come up with anything new and unique that will impress the fan, that will make an impression with the fan as it did, say, in the early 60s. I use this analogy many times with other people when I discuss this matter. Think about the real world with, say, cell phone. When the cell phone first came out, it was amazing. It was humongous, right? It's this big. It's like the size, it's bigger than the size of a corn cob. And everyone was amazed. It was a marvel, a technology marvel, okay? And then a few years later, for those that's old enough to remember, the next craze, what was it? The Motorola Razr, the thinnest cell phone at the time. That was all the rage for a few years in 2003, 2004, even 2005. And then guess what? The iPhone came out, right? And that was incredible. So when you have something like that, where you start out with nothing, the new stuff that were introduced in the 10-year span of the cell phone was just amazing. Okay, amazing. No one will dispute how awesome the first cell phone all the way through the first iPhone. But since the first iPhone came out, it takes a lot to impress most people. Sure, people still upgrade to the iPhone 4, iPhone 5S, whatever it is. There's still upgrade going on, but it's how many people out there are impressed or wowed by this technology, right? So that's the same thing with what's going on with comic books. From the early 60s through the mid 60s, it was a lot of wow moment. And then eventually, you can't keep topping yourself, okay? And that's what happened like from 1968 onward. I think even Jack Kirby topped out on his creativity. So it's not about, Jack not giving Marvel great ideas. Even if he create the fourth world with Marvel, I'm not sure it would blow up in popularity. For me, 1968 is a wonderful year. I think the corporate buyout allowed Marvel to introduce new title, and that is awesome. It definitely introduced a lot of newer title to the readers, and that's a good thing to me, not a bad thing. And start out in January 1968 was a big bang right away, right off the bat. I have shown many of these books before, but right off the bat in January, you have the conclusion of the first crossover, I believe. You have the conclusion of the storyline that span between Daredevil and the Fantastic Four titles. So that's a big thing, because you're talking about one of the earliest, if not the first, crossover between two titles where a story span across two different titles. Of course, it gave birth to what we have today, where it's crossovers every month, every titles, right? So you have that, and on top of that, you have, of course, the launch of Hulk title with 102, and then you have the first appearance of Mary Jane's on the cover, and then this book. To me, this is probably the most blatant money grabbing thing that Marvel did in 1968, because this is a one-time book. You know, it's rare back in those days to have a one-shot type of book. So it's a great book. I don't believe I had shown either one of these books, so I might do that at the end of the video. And last but not least is of course the launch of Captain America with his own title in issue 100. So there you go. I've tried to keep this video not too long, so that concludes this portion of 1968. Let's see if I can get the remaining year of 1968 in the next video. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Until next time, bye. Okay, so here's a close-up look of the book. Gorgeous, beautiful book. Let's see. Perfect centering, just the way I love. The spine is really beautiful on this book. Very little flaws there. The biggest flaw of this book that keep the grades down is right there. I'm sure it will show. There's a tiny 1/8 of an inch tear right there, as you can see right there. But other than that, you know, the other issue is of course the white cover is slightly yellow. It's tough to find Silver Age Marvel that has an all white cover. So, but that's the two negative about this book, is that little tear there and the yellowing of the cover. But I would probably say this book is a 9.2 if I have to give it a grade. Good enough for me. And that's it. Thanks for watching.